It began with a knock that shouldn't have happened. At 2:14 a.m. on November 9, 2003, a woman named Claire Donovan opened the front door of her one-story home in Traverse City, Michigan, thinking her teenage son had forgotten his house keys again. Instead, she found only the empty porch light flickering against a blue Chevy parked across the street, and then the sound of footsteps retreating into the fog. That was the last confirmed moment anyone saw Claire Donovan alive. By sunrise, her car sat in the driveway, engine cold. Her cell phone and wallet lay on the kitchen counter. Only one thing was missing, Claire herself. The front door showed no forced entry. The neighbors heard nothing but the wind off Lake Michigan. Police arrived before 7 a.m., and within hours the Donovan home was a crime scene swarming with uniforms, tape, and cameras. Sergeant Mark Ellison of the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office remembered it clearly because nothing added up. There were no signs of struggle, no broken glass, no smeared blood, not even a displaced chair. It was as if Claire had simply walked outside and vanished into the lake mist. She was 36 years old. A nurse, a mother of one, known in her neighborhood for organizing bake sales and volunteering at the clinic. Her routine was clockwork. Wake at 6, coffee at 6:15, work by 7. She did not disappear. Not without a reason. When the detectives pulled her phone records, the final call was to a local landline at 2:03 a.m. No answer. The number belonged to a man named Jason Merritt, a maintenance technician she knew from the clinic. He told police he'd been asleep, denied any late-night contact, and provided an alibi backed by his girlfriend. With nothing else to go on, detectives let him go. 3 days later, a jogger found a torn scarf wedged in the reeds along the Boardman River, a mile from Claire's home. It was hers, confirmed by her sister. The lab swab showed skin cells from 2 profiles, one female, one male, but the male DNA was too degraded for a match. That tiny failure, a bad sample in a cold Michigan autumn, would stall the case for 2 decades. For months, the investigation chased leads that went nowhere. Fishermen reported seeing a figure near the pier that night. A truck driver swore he'd picked up a hitchhiker, matching Claire's description on US 31. But nothing checked out. By February 2004, the search officially ended. Claire Donovan was declared missing, presumed dead. Her son moved in with relatives. The house was sold. The case file was boxed and labeled, Your 037142, missing person, closed pending leads. What no one knew was that inside that sealed box lay a single cotton swab in a plastic tube, the DNA sample that technology couldn't read yet. Spring 2019. Detective Rachel Keller joined the cold case unit with a reputation for solving the unsolvable. She'd cut her teeth on a decades-old double homicide in Flint, using touch DNA and genealogical tracing. When she saw the Donovan file gathering dust on a lower shelf, she pulled it open out of curiosity. Inside, Polaroids from 2003, handwritten notes in fading ink, and that unprocessed swab sealed in evidence tape. The label read, Partial male DNA, insufficient sample. Keller called the state lab in Lansing. Advances in low copy number DNA testing could now amplify trace genetic material once considered useless. She signed the authorization papers herself and shipped the swab under chain of custody. 6 weeks later, the results came back. A complete profile. Unknown male. Uploaded to CODIS. No direct hit. But the forensic genealogy team found something else. A second cousin match in a public ancestry database from Ohio. A branch that led to a family name Keller recognized from the file. Merritt Jason, Merritt's grandnephew, had uploaded his DNA for fun in 2018. That data connected the dots that 2003's technology couldn't. When Keller reopened the case formally on June 4, 2019, Jason Merritt was 67 years old. Retired and living 2 towns over in Kalkaska. He was married now, a grandfather, with no criminal record since his youth. But the DNA didn't care about reputations. The match percentage was so strong that Keller knew she had her suspect, but she needed confirmation. Undercover officers followed Merritt for 6 weeks, collecting discarded coffee cups and napkins. On the 3rd attempt, the lab got a viable saliva sample. The result was unequivocal, a match to the male DNA on Claire Donovan's scarf. 2 decades after that foggy night, the case that had haunted Traverse City was about to explode back into the headlines when Keller and her partner walked up the path to Merritt's front door on a July morning. "Body cams rolling," he answered with a smile, the same easy smile he'd given police in 2003. "Jason Merritt?" Keller asked. He nodded. "You're under arrest for the murder of Claire Donovan." The camera caught the moment his face collapsed. Not shock, recognition, because he knew this day had been coming for 22 years. The air inside interview room B felt too still, like a vacuum sealed around the sound of the recording device's steady red blink. Detective Rachel Keller sat across from Jason Merritt, the man whose DNA had just detonated 22 years of unanswered questions. He looked older than his mugshot from 2003. Grey hair, soft jaw, heavy glasses. On the table sat his reading glasses, folded neatly beside a half-empty bottle of water. He didn't ask for a lawyer. That, Keller knew, was the first sign of guilt. People who thought they were innocent didn't try to stay comfortable. "I know why I'm here," Merritt said before she even asked. His voice was calm, too calm. "I didn't mean for any of it to happen." The words "I didn't mean to" echoed like a confession. Keller pressed record. 22 years earlier, Jason Merritt had been a maintenance technician at North Shore Medical, where Claire Donovan worked as a nurse in the recovery ward. The two had known each other professionally, nothing more according to co-workers. But Merritt's personnel file told a different story. Back in 2002, a nurse had filed a complaint alleging that Merritt followed her to the parking lot after a late shift and asked her out repeatedly despite her refusals. The complaint had been dismissed as misunderstanding. The HR memo bore Claire's signature. As a witness, Keller watched Merritt's expression carefully when she placed that document in front of him. "She signed this," Keller said. "You remember that?" He swallowed hard. "Yeah, she didn't like me much after that. Did that bother you?" He didn't answer right away. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, filling the space between them with something close to electricity. "I just wanted to talk to her," he said finally. "That night, I drove by her place. She'd always wave when I passed by after work. I thought she might want to talk. I knocked on her door, but she looked scared. I tried to calm her down. It all went wrong." Keller stayed silent, letting the confession breathe. "I pushed her and she fell. She hit her head on the porch step. It wasn't supposed to—" His voice cracked. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. "What did you do, Jason?" He rubbed his forehead, whispering something under his breath that the recorder barely caught. She wouldn't stop bleeding. Then, after a long pause, "I wrapped her in a blanket. Put her in the trunk. Drove north." Keller's pen froze mid-note. "Where?" He looked up, eyes dull as if the memory had already played itself out 1,000 times in his mind. "Old Mill Road. The hunting cabin. I buried her there. Deep. July 2019. Forensic teams from the Michigan State Police descended on a wooded stretch off County Road 633, 10 miles outside Traverse City. The area was thick with maple and birch, overgrown with moss and years of forgotten leaves. Merritt had pointed out the approximate location on an old survey map. "By the broken windmill," he'd said. "You'll see the clearing. They found it on the second day. A half-collapsed structure stood at the edge of a dry creek bed. Beneath the floorboards, the cadaver dogs began barking. The first shovel hit compacted clay. Then 3 feet down, a strip of faded fabric, plaid, red and gray. Underneath it, bone. The dental records matched. Claire Donovan. When Keller arrived on site, she didn't speak for a long time. She just stood there, the Michigan wind tearing through the trees, watching the past being pulled from the ground. 22 years had turned Claire's body into evidence. But her presence and her story felt alive again. Merritt's confession continued over 2 days. He admitted to returning home, burning the blanket, and scrubbing his car trunk with industrial cleaner. When asked why he didn't confess earlier, he said, "Nobody asked the right questions." Keller wanted to hate him, but as an investigator, she couldn't afford emotion. She needed his timeline to hold up, and she needed corroboration. That came from a place she didn't expect. While combing through the old case logs, Keller found a note from the original 2003 detective Ellison. The note mentioned a single anonymous call placed to the sheriff's tip line 2 days after Claire vanished. The caller, a woman, had said, "Check the North Woods and the one near the mill." The call was never traced. But Keller now knew who it likely was. Merritt's girlfriend at the time, Heather Loring. When Keller located Heather in 2019, She was living in Ohio under a different name. Divorced. 2 kids. Heather admitted that in 2003, Jason had come home late, sweating and shaking. His clothes were muddy. His knuckles were bleeding. When she asked what happened, he'd said, "I think I hurt someone." Then he'd begged her not to tell anyone, swearing it was just an accident. "I called the police," Heather told Keller. "But I was scared. I hung up before they could ask who I was." That half call had almost solved the case back then. Instead, it became a ghost note buried in a box. The prosecutor moved fast. On August 12, 2019, Jason Merritt was charged with second-degree murder, tampering with evidence and unlawful disposal of a body. The Traverse City Courthouse filled with reporters. Local news ran the headline, "DNA Breakthrough Ends 22-Year Mystery. Nurse's Killer Identified." Claire's son, Matthew Donovan, now 34, sat in the front row at the arraignment. He hadn't spoken publicly since his mother's disappearance, but when asked by a journalist how he felt, he said quietly, "It's not relief. It's gravity." Like something heavy finally landed, the trial revealed one final twist. In late 2003, the original investigators had submitted an evidence request for blood analysis on a porch sample, but the lab returned inconclusive. That sample, retested in 2019, contained DNA from both Claire and Jason Merritt, microscopic traces that placed him inside the house, not just on the porch, meaning Claire hadn't simply fallen and hit her head. She'd been struck hard while inside her own home. The wound on her skull confirmed it, linear fracture consistent with a flashlight or wrench. The accident Jason described never happened. It had been violence, deliberate and silent. When the verdict came down, Keller sat in the gallery, not celebrating but steady, guilty on all counts. Merritt didn't flinch. He just stared ahead, lips pressed thin. As the judge read out the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and the Donovan family walked into the sunlight with nothing to say. Because what could you say, after waiting 22 years for an answer that only confirmed the horror you'd imagined all along? Snow fell the morning of the sentencing, light as dust. The kind of snow that doesn't stick, just drifts through the air like the last moments of something old refusing to settle. Traverse City hadn't seen this much press since 2003. Every local outlet had a camera crew posted outside the courthouse, waiting for closure. Inside courtroom 4B, People v's Jason Merritt had become something larger than a murder trial. It was the story of what happens when technology catches up with guilt, when time itself runs out of hiding places. Detective Rachel Keller took her seat in the back. She hadn't come for the cameras or even for the verdict. That was already done. She came because, in her words, you owe it to the victim to be there at the end. When the judge entered, the room rose. Merritt was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, his expression blank. He looked smaller than before, the kind of small that comes from weeks without sleep and the slow realization that a lifetime has closed behind you. Across the aisle sat Dorothy and Matthew Donovan, Claire's mother and son. Dorothy clutched a rosary. Matthew stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if holding every word he'd wanted to say for 22 years. The judge called for victim impact statements. Dorothy stood first. Her voice trembled, but the words were sharp. "You took my daughter from her son. You buried her in the dark and went home like nothing happened. For 22 years we wondered if she was cold, if she was scared, if she was waiting for us to find her. You don't get to say it was a mistake. You made choices, and now you live with them." The courtroom was silent except for the quiet scrape of someone's pen. Even Merritt's attorney didn't move. Then Matthew rose. He held a folded paper but didn't look at it. "When I was 12, I told myself she was coming back. When I was 20, I told myself she probably wasn't. When I was 30, I stopped telling myself anything at all. But Detective Keller didn't stop. She found you. She found her. And I can breathe again, even if it hurts to." He sat down. Dorothy reached for his hand. That afternoon, Merritt finally spoke. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't apologize. He just said, "I see her in my sleep." "I wish I didn't remember." Keller would later write in her report that it was the closest thing to remorse a man like that can manage. When the case closed officially in the Michigan State Record System, The Donovan file moved from cold case to resolved homicide. But Keller didn't put it away immediately. She spent another week compiling every photo, transcript and document into a digital archive, labeling each file meticulously before sealing the box. On the outside, she wrote a single word, "Found." Then she signed it, Detective R. Keller, 2019. That same week, an intern at the Michigan Crime Lab noticed something strange while cataloging leftover evidence from the case, a blood swab taken from Jason Merritt's old Chevy in 2003. Back then, the lab reported no foreign DNA detected, but under the new system, even degraded mitochondrial traces could reveal ancestry matches. He retested it. The result wasn't Claire Donovan's DNA. It belonged to another missing woman, Amber Walsh. Reported missing in 1998 from Petoskey, to a case that had gone unsolved, the revelation rippled through the unit. Keller returned to work that weekend, staring at the file that bore another woman's name. Another ghost hidden in plain sight. When reporters later asked her if she believed Merritt had more victims, she didn't answer directly. She just said, "Sometimes solving one case opens the door to another." August 2020. A year after the conviction, the Traverse City Police Department unveiled a new plaque outside headquarters. It read, "The Cold Case Unit, dedicated to the pursuit of truth no matter how long it takes. In memory of Claire Donovan, 1967-2003. Justice found in 2019, Matthew attended the ceremony with his own children, 2 girls ages 8 and 10. When asked by a local journalist if he'd tell them about his mother someday, he smiled softly. "Yeah, but I'll tell them more about the people who found her." Detective Keller transferred to Lansing later that year to head a statewide cold case initiative. The program used DNA genealogy to reopen over 200 dormant files across Michigan. In the first 18 months, it solved 9. Each one started with an evidence box just like Claire's, forgotten, misfiled, collecting dust. One of those boxes came from 1998, and on the first page of the report, in black marker, was a familiar note from a retired detective. "Possible link, Merritt." Keller read it twice. Then she closed the folder slowly and whispered the same line she'd said the day Claire Donovan was found. "Nothing stays buried forever." In Traverse City, the Donovan house on Elmwood Drive remains standing. The new owners say sometimes, when the fog rolls off the lake and hits the porch light just right, they see a faint outline near the steps, like a woman turning to look back one last time. No one opens the door after midnight anymore,